If you guys have been following the channel, you know that I took a look at the Liquitex Professional Acrylic ink in the past. Well, now I want to revisit it by taking a look at one of their gray inks. Yeah, let's go ahead and roll that awesome intro. What's up guys, I'm J-Rod of BATTLEBRAWLERproductions. If you're new to the channel, we craft amazing comic book style illustrations through a variety of mediums, and today we'll be doing it through the medium of ink. I am very excited to be revisiting this ink. I took a look at it, I want to say about a year ago with their carbon black, and I was impressed with the quality of it. While I still think that Amsterdam and FW are superior acrylic inks, these aren't bad considering how affordable they are, selling for as little as $4.99 to $6.77 depending on where you go for 1 fluid ounce. Now something that I do want to highlight is what is the difference between acrylic ink and normal ink. A normal ink such as this Black India ink is going to be satin to glossy depending on the finish, it's going to be waterproof but not alcohol marker proof, and overall it's going to give you a solid black while the colors will be slightly transparent, being able to see what's under them. However, acrylic ink has something different to it as it has an acrylic base to it. This acrylic base makes it super opaque, so you're able to layer them on top of each other having very little show. This is great when you have colors and you want to do very cool complex coloring. They work really well with normal acrylic paint and you could do amazing techniques with them. They're not going to be alcohol marker proof just because alcohols and acrylics repel, and also worth noting, while many acrylic inks say they're waterproof, I would personally label them as water resistant, as many of the times when you start to apply heavy usage of water, they do run the risk of chipping, not smearing though. So just want to keep that in mind. Now one thing that's really cool about this inkwell, it's glass, it comes with an eyedropper, it just says to shake well, super opaque, has a good light fastness to it, and overall I really like the presentation of it, but that's just the look of the inkwell itself. Let's go ahead and dive into this with our sketchbook. First dip in, and I really like the smoothness of this ink. It flows beautifully off of my dip pen, and I really like the solid nature of the gray. I think it looks really good. It's not too light, it's not too dark. Something with grays, there's a million different types of them. You know, there's a warm gray, there's a cool gray, a neutral gray, a toner gray, tons of options. I think neutral gray itself is a really solid gray. If I had to pick another one that was my favorite, probably cool gray. I do like those cooler tones compared to a warmer palette, despite red being my favorite color, which is kind of funny how that works. But, you know, we all have our personal preferences. Now, something to keep in mind when it comes to acrylic ink, because this is something a lot of people don't realize, acrylic ink is going to be a lot thicker than most inks that you've used before, especially comparing it to a Sumi and a India ink. That is the product of it having that acrylic base to it, because it's going to be super opaque. It still, as you can see, flows beautifully off of my dip pen, and it will also flow great off of my quill pen. The thing about it is that they are too thick to use in a glass dip pen, so if you do have one of those, you're not going to be able to use it with this ink. Those tend to perform better with a non-waterproof or higher liquid ink. But just something I want to point out. Here's our quill nib to show you guys. Again, it flows really well off it. Your quill nib is going to be great for these tiny line works, tiny cross hatching, and because it has a bigger base to it, it actually holds a lot more ink than the dip pen. So you're going to be dipping a lot less. But I really like how this ink looks. I like the tones that we're going to get with it. Now I want to do a quick brush test, and I'm also going to do a little bit of experimentation to show you a cool effect that you can do with acrylic ink. So putting down the ink, of course when you start to apply it with a brush you are thinning it out, so you may have to do a couple layers. It is going to be slightly transparent, but I really like how solid this looks. I love just how this ink is going down. It is super nice. Again, we're seeing the brush strokes, but I can layer and get that out. But here's something cool that I want to show you guys. So here's just going to be this wet glob of acrylic ink. As I've mentioned before, acrylics and alcohol repel each other. It's just something about the nature of the material. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this alcohol ink, we're going to put a couple drops in here and watch what happens. Yeah, we create that really cool splattered look. Really like it. I really like how they repel each other. Now, I learned this from one of my coworkers, Alexis, and she showed me this really great technique because she uses a lot of the FW inks and a lot of alcohol inks as well. So when she showed me this, I thought this was absolutely cool and I had to try it for myself. And again, what she's going to do, try and do a couple small little drops here. Alcohol ink is super liquidy, so it's very easy to overdo it. As you can see, I keep doing just a little too much, trying to get a little more control. But I love how they are repelling. I really like this look and this effect. It looks really cool. And we could even take this further. If we take our brush and we clean the excess ink that's off of it, we can now go in and kind of push these around and start to mix them and pull them. And you can see how they are repelling, you know, they're congealing as they touch at these edges. And so if I was to wipe it off, you could see how they've mixed together in this really weird way. Absolutely cool. It also speeds up the dry time a little bit of the two mediums as they repel. They're chemically mixing. So this is a really fun, really cool technique. You can see right there, the gray started to mix with this red right here. So yeah, we're going to use this technique in the artwork. I'm going to try and refine it a little bit more though, only because with the nature of alcohol ink, it is super liquidy, so it's easy to over pour like I did. So I'm going to try and refine that just a little bit more, but let's go ahead and get into today's illustration. Now today's illustration is a little bit on the special side, as it's not any of the established characters that we like to draw on the channel. If you've been following me for a while, I like to draw the villains and heroes that I've created. But today, I'm doing something a little different, as I'm drawing this random monster dude I created a year ago. Yeah, I never gave him a name. I've only drawn him once. He looks super weird and wonky. I want to ink him using this technique because I think it'd be really cool. So let's go ahead and roll that super time lapse. Inking this piece was definitely a very unique process, something I don't normally get to say very often on this channel, because this is a drawing of a character that I've never drawn before. It's a character that I don't have a name for. It was just a random thing that popped in my head I put down on paper. And the funny thing about that is it gives me this freedom to just do whatever I want, to be super experimental, and I really like those chances to experiment and explore new combinations, new techniques, new styles, and this was definitely the case. For example, every time I do line art, I always use my dip pen, but I used a short liner brush this time, and to keep things on track, I used my Liquitex black acrylic ink to do it, and I really like how it came out. I felt like I had a lot of confidence and control over my lines. It was very fun and responsive. It was just something to change things up. I ended up using that as my base guideline to apply everything else, because I decided to go in and do a base of alcohol ink on the Bristol so that I can then work on top of it and try and have some of that color show through. While it didn't work out perfectly because it did create a barrier and the acrylic inks didn't absorb into the paper because the alcohol was repelling it, I still like how the layers came out. I like how the color was showing through. I like how almost like organic and messy it looked, in the sense that it looked like torn tissues. Now, part of that is because I am doing deep dive anatomy studies to perform some really cool pieces of artwork for you guys, and so that's all right here on the top of my brain, so that's why I made that connection. But I had a lot of fun layering it, and even though I did forget to hit record so it just randomly appears in the time lapse, it was fun applying all those layers of purple and red ink. I then decided to just take my time building up layers. I then decided, you know what, I think this is good enough, and put more alcohol ink in it. I just had a lot of fun being super experimental. I then decided to do cool effects in the background, and then I decided to blend them together. And then I thought, you know what if I did a dry brushing technique? So I got some tissues, applied some alcohol ink to it, and then just went in and did this cool dry brush effect, and I really like how it looks. This was super fun and experimental. Now, I know I've said this before, but this isn't a bad acrylic ink. It's really good. It's pretty high quality for what you're paying for. It's super affordable. If you can't afford Amsterdam or FW, I definitely recommend this. It's pretty solid. But, and this is a big but, I still think FW is the best acrylic ink I've ever used. It's super high quality. It's very affordable, just being a couple dollars more than this one. And the quality you get along with its versatility is second to none. And it is still to this day the smoothest ink I have ever used. And then you have Amsterdam, which is a couple dollars less than FW, while being a little bit more than this one, still has an insane amount of quality, great variety in its applications, and has a beautiful selection of colors, including a graphite ink. Yes, a graphite ink. So overall, that leads me saying, you know what? This is a solid acrylic ink, but there are two better options out there that I prefer more. Now, if you prefer this one, that's perfectly fine. It will still get the job done. I just think that overall, there are two better options out there that don't cost that much more and have better color selections and are also more versatile. Something that's interesting is that there's no mention of the versatility of this ink on Liquitex's websites or the bottle. Like, I don't know if I can put this in an airbrush, for example, or I can use it in these methods. It's really not clear. And while I really like it, again, it's really good, I just think there's some better options out there. Overall, I really like how this piece came out. I really like how unique it is. I really like how weird it is. And hopefully you guys will like it, so definitely let me know in the comment section down below. But let's go ahead and do that epic grand reveal. And we're done. done. And guys, I really like how this piece came out. Again, it's super weird, super different. It's very unique among all the pieces that I've made for YouTube. While I wouldn't say it's top 10 material, I think it's really cool and unique. But as I mentioned in the time lapse, I would love to hear your guys' opinion on this. But let's go ahead and put it to the side so I can give you my final thoughts after revisiting Liquitex Acrylic ink. Overall, I'm really glad I got a chance to revisit both the black ink and explore the gray ink. I think these are pretty good acrylic inks. Definitely not the nicest out there. I still think FW and Amsterdam provide a better experience for just a little bit more of a cost. These aren't that bad. If you want to just get a cheap acrylic ink to try that's not going to be garbage, definitely recommend these because they're really, really good and solid. And if you're a fan of Liquitex and already use a lot of their paintings, mediums, gels, and everything else, definitely recommend picking them up too to add a little bit of spice to your artwork. They're definitely a lot more liquid than the soft bodies, and you're going to have a lot of fun incorporating that into the work, while you do get a lot more transparency with them as you start to spread them out with a brush, more so than the other two inks I mentioned before. I still think they're really good. They layer really well. I really like them, and it was fun just doing some cool experimental work with them. So overall, while I did originally rate these a 9 out of 10 on my scale, I'm actually going to rate them now a 7 out of 10. Only because I personally rate the De La Roni FW as a 9 out of 10 and the Amsterdam at an 8 out of 10, and I do think that these are less than those. I am going to rate it at that 7. While I could theoretically bump it up to an 8 just because of the cost and the quality, I still want to keep that distinction there. Still really good inks, still recommend them, but I love to hear your guys' opinions in the comment section down below, both of what you think of the inks themselves and my artwork. Your feedback doesn't just help me become a better artist, it also helps me become a better content creator. But thank you all so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel for more art and animation based content, and remember, I'm Jerry out of BLACKEST. I draw power in my own soul. Thank you all for watching.